As we get started here this morning, our morning panel discussion is our second panel about rules changes from last year, focusing on hitting and defense. Our panelists are Bobby Scales, former Chicago Cub and Vice President of Baseball at Sports Info Solutions, Mark Simon, Editorial Operations Lead and Staff Writer at Sports Info Solutions, and Meg Rowley, Managing Editor at FanGraphs. And rejoining us again today, our moderator from the MLB Network, Ryan Kenny.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Mark Simon and I worked together at ESPN for a bunch of years. In fact, I remembered, I think where we started to go on air, we had a pretty good baseball argument somewhere. And so I brought him on the Brian Kenny show. And it was like a Derek Jeter argument, wasn't it?
Probably defense related.
Probably, yes.
From a Mets fan.
Yeah, I don't know who won that one eventually. Now that looking back, I'm not sure who was right. We had a good argument. And at the time, again, to have a researcher on the air was kind of new. And afterwards, my producers were like, that was a really good argument, a really good baseball argument. I said, well, yeah, it's Mark Simon, of course, our researcher. So we hope to bring that to you today and look at what was really seismic changes in baseball this year. Like I saw a story like a week into the season this year where it was, sure, they've cut a half hour out of the ball game, per game, but what about the other issues of baseball? And I said, can we just enjoy one thing? Like, 1 week in, a half hour of dead time is gone. Dead time, gone. And that's just an ancillary, benefit of the pitch timer. The pace completely changed the way we saw baseball and viewed baseball. So let's start there. Let's start a little wider before we get into the specifics. And I know you guys study this, but Bobby, why don't we start? You're closest to me. Give me your overall view of the pitch timer and what it did to Major League Baseball.
I thought it was outstanding. I thought the change was outstanding. Obviously, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can look at this, but from just a raw time perspective, former position player, played, up in cup of coffee in the big leagues and up, all over the world. I don't think you'll find a player, specifically a position player, that was against it because the pace of the game moved quicker. It forced guys to get the ball, throw it, figure out what you want to do, hang another sign, shake yes or no, do it again. And I think it was better for the game. I think the game was crisper. From a viewing perspective, it was certainly more pleasant because you're going to probably be out of there under 3 hours unless there was just a tremendous amount of runs scored. I just think it made the game better as a whole. And so that was the one for me that was the most impactful.
I thought it changed the way I was watching the game. Even in the first week of the season, I remember I'm at my kitchen. I get home after doing my show. I'm in my kitchen and I look outside, I missed another pitch. And then I'd look back up and I'd say, I missed another half inning. It just went by. I'd learned to watch distracted. And suddenly I had to relearn, no, I need to watch the game and actually be focused on it. So it was kind of a real metaphysical sort of change in the way I was looking at life and everything else. Mark?
So as an East Coast person who, as a job requirement, has to follow a West Coast team, it made my nights a lot easier to be able to go to sleep before 1 a.m. because the San Francisco Giants games were over instead of being up long past 1 a.m. So from that perspective, it was good. I liked it overall as a concept. There were times where I did miss the old way a little bit. I think particularly when I went to the ballpark, I don't want to be at the ballpark for 2 hours and 10 minutes. I want to be at the ballpark for 2.5, 2:40. I think it was, maybe Joe Sheehan was talking about this, that if you're going with friends, you like to talk to your friends. You like to manage the game. I managed games with my dad for 40 years. So from that perspective, to me, it was good, but it wasn't necessarily great. And I did like it, as I said, from the perspective of an East Coaster.
No, I know what you mean. I think, and this was part of the pushback. I remember, then Commissioner Bud Selig, when he was pushing back on it years ago, was saying, all our studies show that people at the ballpark like this length of game, which is true. I remember as a kid, those who were in my demographic, my father and I used to circle for Yankee Stadium the doubleheaders because going to a single game didn't seem like enough. It's like, let's get 2 games. But then it became this interminable slog where you could see everything just grinding to a halt. So I don't look at it as simply that, it's a better entertainment product or a TV product. I think it's a better product on the whole. But I know what you're saying. I've looked up and said, 5th inning, come on. I just got here. I get that. Meg, your overall pitch timer, the overall effects on you.
I think that the thing that I was struck by was how quickly I forgot we had to have a conversation about the pitch timer. Like that to me was evidence that we had sort of struck the right balance. Obviously, it was on every spring training broadcast because you have to bring fans up to speed on the rules around the timer when, the hitter has to be ready, when the pitcher has to be ready. But after the first couple of weeks, I just didn't really notice it was there. It felt zippy, but not rushed. I agree that when you're at the ballpark, especially if you're like, hey, I'd like to go get a beer in the second inning. And then you're like, wow, I just missed 2 innings of baseball because this line was long. That can be a little less fun. But I think that, we were striking the right balance between moving the action along, having it feel exciting and lively, but not overly rushed. And especially as violations decreased over time, which we saw them dip dramatically as the season went on, you weren't even being reminded of it because a pitcher wasn't delivering the pitch in time. So I think that, it not being, this intrusive thing was a testament to how well it worked.
I just did we had a seminar for the league where they got us up to speed on the changes for the coming season, including that the pitch timer will be 15 and 18 now. I like, Bobby, that they're still trying. And I think this is also, again, we were stuck in the mud in baseball for a long time that you just can't change it. And I think this is an impetus now to say, hey, you can change things. Things can get better. By the way, that's like a wider societal thing, right? Like things can get better. They don't have to keep getting worse. I think that's inspiring in a way. Give me something, each of you. Is there something you would like to tweak? I know we're kind of jumping into that, but it just might, it opened up your head. Because that immediately, like now they're making small tweaks. They also found, let me throw in, as the season went along, in the later part of the season, the game started stretching a little longer again. Players will, again, working for their own, their own performance, will find ways to stretch things out so they can process a little bit more. So they found by September, the games had a couple of minutes, had logged back on. So they're making all sorts of efforts now that the timer is going to start by the time the pitcher gets the ball back. So if he goes for a little walk, the pitcher doesn't start again when he gets to the mound. So, Bobby, give me is there something that you'd say, we could do this, the game would get better?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head from my particular perspective. I think you can go a little bit faster. I mean, I said on this panel last year with Dallas Braden, and he said, these guys are going to figure it out. And they did, because they're elite athletes and that's what they're going to do. I do think you can go a little bit quicker, and I would like to see it. We'll see where it is this year with the reduction, a couple more seconds this year, but I do like that change. I mean, there's no reason for all that. You train, you do all these things. There's, you have enough time as an athlete to process some of these things in your head. I think the mental skills coaches are a little bit mad because they're having to readjust all their thoughts of, reset and this, that, and the other. But I do believe that was the one that I would tweak, and I was glad to see that change come about.
I think they took away a mound visit, maybe, and I'm this is off the top of my head. I think on one more mound visit went away. Small things, but every bit helps. Mark?
Ghost runner, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Get rid of the ghost runner.
That's
okay. Yeah, I'm down with that. I think it's kind of a pandemic rule, right, Meg?
I'm ready for the challenge system in Major League Baseball. I mean,
balls and strikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a full automatic zone. Mark and I are both pitch framing enthusiasts, so the idea of the full robo zone is tragic to us, but having seen the challenge system in action in fall league, it is, again, if we're looking for balance, right, we're trying to find the balance between being able to have a conversation at the ballpark, but not get bogged down in all of this adjusting of gloves and mitts, right? It strikes the perfect balance because it allows us to address egregious miscalls, but it doesn't, completely shift the way that we understand the strike zone. And it adds a strategic element to the game, which a lot of these rule changes, it's about taking time out, but having, a catcher have to be good at knowing when to challenge. That's interesting. That's a thing for us to understand and analyze, for players to get good at, right, and demonstrate a skill. So I'm ready for the challenge system.
How many challenges is the right amount? 4. What is it now? Is it 3? Are they looking at 3?
I think it's 3, but you retain challenges if they're successful.
Okay.
So you can challenge again.
Bobby, would imagine, I said immediately, I think it's like someone's going to use that in the first inning. It's like, whoa, challenge.
Yeah. Every team's got that player that every ball he takes is actually, it's a ball. There's no question that it's a ball, even if it's belt middle. So you're going to you're going to have that guy on every squad. But no, I think I would say, you said 4, I said 5. I mean, that's negligible, right? I would say 3 to 5 is probably the right spot for me in that, because you do want to use them judiciously, but also I think understanding the timing with when, it's like, what is a leverage reliever and when is leverage, right?
Mhm.
Leverage might be in the 7th inning when 3, 4, 5 are coming
Right.
up.
If
So-
it gets there.
Right.
Again, they practice all these things. And again, I mentioned yesterday, I was wrong about the stolen bases. I thought it could open up the floodgates completely, because why wouldn't everyone just be running or at least getting throws over there? I immediately see this. Everyone's always working in their own short-term self-interests. It's a basic human element. And I would see all these batters. I wonder who would have the discipline to like, I think that was borderline, but let me allow it to happen in the 7th inning when Big Bob is batting. Like, who's going to wait for that? We'll see. Mark, I want to jump right in with get into the next part. Effect of the shift restrictions. It wasn't a shift ban, it was shift restrictions. Give me your overall thoughts. I know you study this very closely. Overall thoughts on what's most interesting about what the shift restrictions did to hitting and offense.
It didn't do as much as I think people would have thought that it did. And again, quoting Sheehan, who's here later tonight, 100 more singles than there were last year. Yes, if you hit a hard pulled line drive, your batting average was 30 points higher, but there aren't enough of those to offset everything else that happens in a game. It had, I think, and it helped. I think we could say it probably helped some guys, but if you're looking at the bigger picture effect of it, I don't think it was as great as people thought that it would be.
It was that hard, I don't know how to characterize it, maybe like the Brian McCann, Mark Teixeira, hard shot to short right field that was being caught by a guy standing right there. That's out. And that's 30 points in batting average, right? On a hard hit pulled left-handed hitter, correct?
On anyone, yeah.
Right. So that's significant for that little subset, but not on the by and large, not.
Right, but like
Right.
Schwarber didn't get better. Schwarber got worse, right?
Right.
Like,
And Corey Seager get better. I know he got better on the
right, exactly.
But how much did the shift help Corey Seager's explosion?
So Petriello and I have both looked into this, and we thought that it did. I think his jump was like 100 points or so in terms of batting average, specifically on grounders and short liners like those line drives. He was one that it helped. Kyle Tucker was another one that it seemed to help a little bit. Josh Naylor a little bit. But one thing that we don't factor into that is just like hitter comfort. And I think the psychological effects of being at the plate and not having to think about it, which is like, I don't know if I didn't ask him, but like Matt Olson faced a shift every single time he was at the plate in 2021, 22, 20, 19, whatever. Last year didn't. Look what he did.
It's a good point. Yeah, that's hard to.
He was too busy hitting the ball over the fence or
Well,
off.
yeah,
So he wasn't.
his batting average on grounders and liners went up too. So yeah.
Well, and I think that that's part of the thing here. It's like the value balance for these guys hasn't fundamentally shifted. A lot of them are still swinging out of their shoes because they want to hit home runs. I mean, I think we actually did see the strikeout rate for left-handed hitters against the shift go up slightly. And it's not like we didn't have any shifts. We just didn't have the extreme shifts that we had been seeing in prior years. You did see a lot of guys standing as close to that dividing line as they possibly could without an umpire calling a violation, right? So it wasn't like they were always perfectly traditionally positioned, but you're right. We didn't have, a second baseman or a shortstop in short right field.
Didn't you notice that in the playoffs a few times? A few times I was with, watching it with my colleagues. I'm like, whoa, check that. Like they must have been right on the line. I don't think they did that a lot. Like, I don't think there were violations, were there, of guys stepping over the line?
No, I don't actually know that we recorded a single violation at the big league level last year.
Yeah.
So they know exactly where that line is, and they're going to get as close to it as they possibly can to maximize, their range.
We briefly touched on this. I had to admit, because I'm very much against, banning anything that's like strategic or an intellectual approach to baseball. To me, like, of course they hate the shift. Like at first they spent 70 years saying the shift didn't work. And then the moment it comes in, they have to ban it because it's so effective. It's amazing to me. But I thought had the shift come about like after the Boudreaux shift in Ted Williams, and it had developed and had matured, that it wouldn't have been a scapegoat. But everything happening with the 3 true outcomes and strikeouts and batting average sinking and no more singles and the whole, all or nothing approach at the plate, it became an easy target. And yet, Meg, I had to admit, it made for a more aesthetically pleasing
Anytime you
experience.
can get Brian to talk about aesthetics, I feel like I have won a major victory.
I mean, I like baseball too. And there's that little ground ball that we grew up knowing was a single was now a single. So even I had to admit, yes, I came to that. So even though we're talking about small subset,
Sure.
Maybe it's once every other game where a ball up the middle or to that right side is a single. It used to be a single. Now it's a single again. I had to admit, I thought that worked.
I think that there are kind of two questions here, right? There's the beauty of the single as an entity of itself. But then I think that the broader thing is a diversity of offensive performances in the game, right? It's really fun to watch Aaron Judge wallop the ball. But if that's all baseball is, it's kind of boring. If for no other reason than there aren't a lot of guys who can wallop the ball quite as well as Aaron Judge can, right? And so I think having room in the game for a variety of offensive skill sets makes for a more interesting game, even if you're not like super jazzed about singles, which is fine. Like they're singles,
Well, Meg, you have to, I mean, the thing is you have to sell that upstairs.
Right.
And that's the thing. The single was devalued. Guys can hit singles the other way. Guys can poke the ball the other way. The elite athletes are elite for a reason, both pitching and hitting, right? And I think one thing you understand, you see in the playoffs, how many base hits, how many extra base hits were hit oppo in the playoffs versus in the regular season.
Right.
When does it matter the most? When folks are trying to put goggles on at the end, right? And you see guys getting game tying, go ahead RBI singles the other way. Whereas in June, probably trying to yank one over the second baseman's head, split a gap, or yank one over the fence.
And I think you're also seeing, I know that base running isn't part of this panel, but I think viewing all of these rule changes sort of as part of an ecosystem is valuable because it's all of these things together, right? It's the fact that there are more kinds of hits. It's the fact that you have, guys who are trying to take advantage of the stolen base rules, really pressing their advantage there. And I think that the other sort of underrated part of this is the defense associated with the shift isn't the fun defense you want to watch. If a guy's just standing there and the ball's hit right to him and it's an out, well, it's not a highlight, right?
Right.
It leaves room for acrobatic plays, more impressive plays. You're actually able to appreciate what incredible athletes these infielders can be because you're seeing them do stuff that's harder. And I think that has value too. That's a part that we don't talk about as much, but if guys just standing there and able to catch the ball, okay, like now we go to an innings break. I think that we want to be able to give these guys the opportunity to showcase how incredible they are at this sport. And just standing in, short right field and catching an easy pop-up isn't doing that.
By the way, really good points by all three of you. This is excellent, by the way. Let me just do a little review. This is excellent. You made me think of so many things, but I have to pay homage to this room and and where did this come from, by the way? All these things that happen, you want a diversity of attack. How did it become this properly aligned attack with the proper adjustment to the incentives? It came from sabermetrics.
Mm-hmm.
It came from what happened in this room years and years ago and by the founding fathers that properly identified what worked in baseball, but it didn't make the best entertainment product, right? I've had many people say, Harold Reynolds, Ken Rosenthal, you've ruined everything. I said, yes, but I was the one arguing for that Adam Dunn was actually a great player. A guy with 40 home runs and 100 walks every year, that's a great player. Oh, he clogs the bases. Fine. He's scoring a ton of runs. And that was the proper understanding of where runs came from and what was effective, but it doesn't make the best product. What's interesting, Bobby, what you said was, it depends on what upstairs you mean. Upstairs, the baseball ops kids, the baseball ops department, and the club executives, they all want the rip and crush approach, and they like playing lawyer ball at the plate to draw your base. Fortunately, and usually it doesn't work this way, the upstairs executive, the league executives and those now in charge are more aligned to what you're saying, Meg, in that we want a more aesthetically pleasing way of playing baseball. And I think is my one little ad. The one extra thing they could do is deaden the ball. Now that we've, all you have to do, think deaden the ball, not completely deaden the ball. Think of, do you remember?
On me, please. No,
No.
I'm kidding.
The beginning of 2022. Do you remember not last year, but the year before? Remember when the Cleveland, I guess they were already the Guardians, got off to this great start, and they were this punch and Judy club. They didn't have big hitters, and suddenly they were running and they were competing and they were at the top of the division. The home runs rate was at 1986 levels for the beginning of that season. And then it changed and it started to go up.
Right.
But to your point, Meg, we'll start there. Aaron Judge was still hitting home runs,
Right.
but the little second baseman wasn't hitting opposite field bombs to the upper deck. So I think
What's wrong with that?
well, if you like 2019 baseball, right.
Yeah.
You get this extreme baseball. I think what we want to see, and I think it was mentioned yesterday, is a 1980s style of baseball. We're close. I think, give me your thoughts on that. If they deaden the ball to 1986 levels or 1951 levels of home runs, would that lead to more of that Cleveland style of baseball that, hey, we need singles and stolen bases here?
I don't want to disparage our friends at the league, but I am skeptical about their ability to dial in precisely the kind of ball that they want, because they haven't demonstrated great skill at that over the last couple of years.
But now that there's a humidor at every park, you should,
Sure.
and you could be upfront about it. Don't hide it. Say, this is what we're trying to do.
Sure.
We're going to dial it up.
I don't know that I view altering the baseball as sort of last resort. And I think that we want to try other things before we change that piece of
Like
equipment.
what?
I think that, I'm not a pie slice person, but I know that there are further shift restrictions that folks have advocated for. I also think we want to see this play out for a couple of years in the big leagues. We instituted these rule changes and there was an existing player population, right? We had the personnel that we did, and they have skill sets, some of which are adaptable to try to take advantage of those rules, some of which aren't. And let's give it a little bit of time to see, first of all, how stable these changes are, and also, how they are affecting player dev and prospect evaluation downstream of the game, because we had a bunch of guys coming up through the minors who were thought of as shift-aided second basemen. How adaptable are they going to be? How important is it going to be for them to be able to play, a style of second base defense that we associate with, 10 or 20 years ago? I think that a willingness to make change is a very important thing for the commissioner to have. And I think that the resistance to that for a long time was to the game's detriment. But I also don't want us to overreact to, a year's worth of data when, it takes time for baseball players to change, and it takes time for new guys to come up through the system. Let's see what those guys can make of this before we monkey with the ball more, if only because, again, I am skeptical of our ability to dial that in as precisely as I think we would want to be able to say, okay, yeah, let's deaden the ball.
You're being very prudent. I know I've seen 6 months of it. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
I was like, okay, we've seen it. Then the players will adjust.
You're the guy in our comments at FanGraphs who's like, you need to change WAR now. And I'm like, how? I don't know, but I'm ready.
I'm willing to help if you're looking for help there. You bring up an interesting topic. Did we find that second base was a defensive position again, Mark?
All right, I had like 5 things that I wanted to say in response to what you said before.
Answer that and then go back. Go ahead.
And this was like the question that I was second base this past year among the infield positions had the second highest OPS. It was higher than short, it was higher than third. It was behind first, obviously. So I wasn't necessarily as in tune with that idea as you said. If you look at the ages of second basemen now, for the most part, they're younger.
Mhm.
Like they're younger athletic guys. They're guys that convert from shortstop to Rang, Stott, Andres Jimenez, all these guys. Your oldest second baseman now is Jose Altuve, and he's there because he can hit the heck out of the ball.
Yeah.
Semion's 33, still fields very well. So I don't think that we're going back to that Doug Flynn, if you want to invoke a name for the old folks here. So yeah, the thing that I wanted to bring up from 86, I looked this up thinking that you would bring up 1986. A game from 1986.
I like 1986.
Who's your favorite team in the big leagues?
A game from 1986 had 33% fewer homers in 2023, 6 fewer strikeouts, twice the caught stealing, and more singles. So I don't think we're as close to what you want. And
Oh no, you have to deaden the ball. No,
and cut back the strikeouts.
Yes. So let me ask you, do you aesthetically, or as an analyst, do you like, I think you understand what 1986 baseball is. It's skinnier players, fewer home runs, fewer strikeouts. Do you like that?
I like for the most valuable thing in baseball to be more rare than it is right now.
Okay.
I like and I would say that about the 3-point shot in the NBA too. I like for that to be more rare,
right.
but
Yeah.
the NBA is kind of going and going and going and going. Everyone wants more offense. I'm not.
Yeah, see, I look at, right.
I think we want more
Yeah,
action.
Yep.
Yeah,
For me, just watching guys punch out
yeah.
Right.
all the time, punch out, homer, walk.
Yep.
No,
Right.
that's not the game, man. That ain't it. You can go out, we can go out, set up some cones out here and play strikeout in the street and set a boundary. And we just, Mark will pitch and Joe Rosales will, he'll do whatever. And then I'll go hit and we'll hit home runs. And
So
whoever
how do you
wins at
do
the end
that?
of the
Bob?
game.
How do you do that?
I think you prioritize. Listen, Meg, what you said about diversity of attack. This is offensive baseball. This is not home run derby. That's a distinct difference in my mind. And I worked in 2-player development systems. I ran the system in LA for 4 years, and I worked in the Pirate system a few years ago. Okay, and you have to prioritize. I think it goes all the way down to scouting and evaluation. Okay, this guy may not evolve into a 30 home run guy, but can he hit 30 doubles? Can he run the bases?
Bobby, can I jump in? Like, everybody talks that game,
Right.
but in reality, when you're scouting that kid, you're going to promote the kid that's hitting bombs and the kid that you say, I don't think his power projects, because
I'm going to promote the guy that has an impact on the offensive game.
right. And if there's that many home runs, then home runs win.
If
You're
it's-
going to get the home run kid.
If it's an amount far and away, yes. I think I'm not saying there aren't guys that get to the big leagues that don't deserve it. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is I think we can diversify the skill set if the front office prioritizes it greater.
And the front office will value that kid that we all think we like, right? The Tony Gwynn, the young Tony. We all love the idea of that kid. But if we're playing 1986 baseball, then that kid's very valuable again.
No doubt.
Right. Okay. So
Right.
that you need to do one.
And I don't think you have to deaden the ball to do it. That's my point.
You don't, or you do?
I don't think you have to
What
deaden
are
the
you
ball
going
to
to
do
do if you don't deaden the ball?
it. Prioritize from a team perspective, prioritize.
But they're going to their priority is to win, and they're going to
Yes.
get the kid that helps them win. And if the ball's flying out of the park, you're going to get guys that have to hit home runs. You're going to promote the home run hitter, the punch and Judy.
I understand.
We're not moving.
So here's my thing. You were saying just home run bopper and punch and Judy. There's a good player in the
Yes.
on the middle of the continuum. There's a really good player in here.
And is he
If
getting
it's not-
promoted now?
No,
Does that kid
and
get
I don't think I don't think this player's getting prioritized. I think you'll have 5 guys that can go yard every other at bat, and then you'll have a couple guys who are filling out your roster to do this, and you're shuffling this guy in here. To me, this guy, we're on the margins here, right? We're on the margins. There's a big swath of players that I think are going underdeveloped and overlooked because they don't fit this profile.
Oh, you're right. And I'm saying I think you need to close that loop.
Yes.
And have the incentive system. Players now, baseball ops they are properly reacting to what works. And you need to, I think, again, you can move the mound back, and that seems drastic. That's
Yes.
difficult. And players really resist that. And I understand why. But if you just deaden the ball, you get it down to the point where only the home run hitters are hitting home runs. Then suddenly Luis Ariz can play his game and feel like, hey, I'll get paid for this. As opposed, or you bring up Jose Altuve. Jose Altuve, I think, would be Rod Carew, except he saw what everybody wanted, which was power.
That's right. And how many players are we ruining when they're chasing that? How many guys who could be impactful big leaguers who don't end up developing what they could be as a major league player because we are prioritizing that?
Tons.
I think what Bobby's alluding to here is that there's a false dichotomy being established here that you can only hit home runs or you can hit for average. I
100%.
mean, the guy with the second highest batting average last year was Ronald Acuna Jr. There are very good hitters who are, he hit his fair share of home runs. He stole a bunch of bases. Like, not everybody's going to be literally the best player in baseball. So I'm not saying that those guys are just on offer, but I think the idea that you can only do one or the other is something of a false dichotomy that we shouldn't accept.
But I think in the real world, who I'm looking at is a 19-year-old kid in low A ball
Sure.
that's making a choice, right?
Yes.
And
that's what
he's
happens.
making lots of choices as to what player he's going to be and what are my bosses really reacting to? What do they really want? What's going to get me promoted? And you can go the Rod Carew route, or you can go the Brian McCann route, or whatever that selling out for power route is.
And I think that this illustrates why the shift became such a useful sort of boogeyman for people. The real problem here is that there is a fundamental sort of imbalance between hitting and pitching right now. And getting guys to strike out less is a much harder project than saying, you can't stand there. Go stand over there.
Mhm.
Right. And so
Right.
it makes sense
Right.
that this became the place where we were trying to focus our efforts. But you're alighting on something that's right, Brian, which is that the value proposition needs to work for teams, and absent what is effectively like regulatory intervention from the league, that might not happen.
Right.
But if we have a couple of years of these guys doing well, maybe the calculus changes at the player dev level. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is a problem. Like, I don't know that it is one that is easily resolvable even within the existing rule structure.
Well, that's it. This is interesting, Mark, and then I'm going to let you jump in because I know you haven't spoken. I just want to throw in, like, John Smoltz has been on me for years about, like, these pitchers are getting hurt and I want a guy who can pitch and not throw. But every other incentive, every step along the way, if anybody's involved in youth baseball, everything is about popping them in, because that gets you paid. That gets you to college, that gets you a scholarship, gets the coach's attention, and there'll be better pitchers in certain games, but that don't hit 93. And a 15-year-old kid that hits 93 is going to get the attention, get promoted, and get what he wants. So you have to change the incentive system, because everything is about popping the mitt and then also hitting for power. So if that's what gets you paid, that's what gets you promoted, that's what gets you a scholarship, you can't stop that grassroots.
No.
And every dad out there and every kid out there that understands, no, you talk a good game, but I know what you really want.
That's
Go
right.
ahead, Mark.
Actually, I don't, go ahead.
You don't have
I
anything.
agree with that. I agree
None
with
of
that.
that. I think Bobby said, I think they both said it well.
All right. Let me ask then, you bring up a good point. Mark, you can start here.
Yep.
How do you get the ball back in play? And then we're going to take questions. By the way, really good questions yesterday, so I'm going to leave time, so get your questions ready. That's like kind of the last thing we approach here, because, right, it would be great to get the ball back in play. How do we do that without something onerous?
I think that's a great puzzle. I do.
We need something onerous.
I like, it's very hard to hit 97, 98 up here. Nobody's doing that consistently. You either have to completely change the way that a hitter approaches things, or change the physiology of a hitter, or you're gonna have to do something considerably drastic.
By the way, have you ever seen, let me get out here. We did a thing at MLB Tonight where an outlier took the animal, hates the idea of moving them out. 1 foot back, it's here. Yep. That's it. So, like, 1 foot back sounds like this crazy thing you can't do. It's here, and that's it. And then go rebel. Can you do that? Is that too much?
I don't know.
Okay, Bobby.
We lower, I mean, listen, and I'm coming from a, can we do it? Sure, you can do it. Sure, you can do it. They lowered the mound many, many years ago. That made an effect. So can you do it? Sure, you can. I don't think. And again, obviously I was a position player when I played, but again, I'm a fan and lover of the game. I want to do right by the game first. If I will always still personally go upstairs. We've made the strikeout okay as a hitter. It's completely okay to punch out 200, 210, 100. Guys hitting 15 home runs with 20 doubles, punching out 135, 40 times. It's unacceptable. So for me, it's a priority of change in philosophy upstairs. But from a game perspective,
I hear you.
I would rather not, as much as I hate saying this, I would rather not mess with the mound.
I am loath to do it. However, at a certain point, when you're talking about it, and again, I would deaden the ball first. But the next thing is the 1 foot, Meg. I was amazed just by looking at the physicality of it. I'm loath to do it, but would you be in favor? Would you experiment?
I would want to experiment with that. I think that over the last couple of years, when we have seen rule changes, first of all, we've often been testing rule changes simultaneously with one another. I think for something as profound as moving the mound, that needs to be isolated. I do worry about, the continued use of the minor leagues as a laboratory environment for the big leagues, when these guys are also trying to have careers and make their way to the majors, and they are the ones who are having to deal with new seams on the ball and the pitch timer and the challenge system and bigger bases. And it's like, I'm trying to make the big league club. Can you stop monkeying with the game a little bit? So I think that I want to be sensitive to that aspect of this also, which is that these are changes we want to make in the interest of the game. We have to test them to know what they will look like. And that might have pretty profound implications for a generation of player who then has to come up through a minor league system where the mound is in a different spot. Oh, wait, we've decided that's too extreme. The mound's back to where it was before. It's higher, it's lower. Good luck in the bigs, kid.
By the way, you're describing 1880s baseball, right?
Right.
It jumped all over the place.
Yes, and I think that we would agree that the labor environment is better now than it was in the 1880s.
But was the game better? Again, that's why I say dead in the baseball. We think of dead ball baseball as a silly thing with guys in black and white running around, but they're running around the bases. There's triples. The ball is hard to field. Well, they have tiny little gloves if they have gloves at all. But it was kind of an exciting game. So that's what I'm saying. Meg, let's dial down the humidor and style it up, dial it back.
I think that there are smaller changes that you can try and sort of see what the effect of that is. But I do wonder if we're at a point where we are so finely optimized and we have such a wealth of data to try to continue to hone that optimization. And these athletes are so incredible. You're not going back to the 1880s. These guys could break those dudes in half. Like they're, part of it is also just the physicality of players now. Like we have to kind of meet the game where it is and maybe accept that we can tinker, but I don't know that we're going all the way back to something.
Oh no, you'd have Ronald Acuna. I'm not going with this little guy with the handlebar mustache. Like he's gone, but like now you have
bring in the handlebar mustache. That's fine. You talk about aesthetic diversity. I'm all for that.
Now we would have those players. I mean, we on our show on MLB Now, we bandy about these ideas and the of having either a super wall or no walls, and you would suddenly have, like, it sounds insane, but you would suddenly have like an extremely exciting game.
Yeah.
It would sound kind of, but the Ronald Acuñas of the world and everybody else would be racing around for triples now.
Sure.
Kind of a interesting thought.
Yeah, this is you're basically doing an episode of Effectively Wild. Like if we could make baseball different, how different would it be?
Right.
And then we put a pit there and there are mole people. It's a whole thing.
I think there are limits.
Yeah.
But all right, and we'll get to the last points, and then we're going to do questions. And again, we'll kick around any questions you like. Mark, is there something else that?
Yeah, I wanted to revisit something that was said yesterday about Trevor May. When I think it was Eno was talking about how Trevor May had like a panic attack because he thought that he was going to be able to deal with the pitch clock, and then suddenly when he was actually on the mound, he realized that he wasn't able to deal with the pitch clock. I had asked Eric Young, who we know, about some of the questions that you had brought up. And one of the things that he said to me was that for the really good hitting teams like the Braves, that the pitch clock served as like this extra thing and an extra weight on the pitcher to go along with the style that team played and the fact that the lineup was super deep, and that he felt like from the first base coach's box that he could see it in pitchers that the pitch clock had rattled them. And I'll be curious to see this year how that plays out now that pitchers had a year to work with it, and now that 2 seconds are chopped off it with the runner on base.
And the flip side of that is you had guys like Jose Caballero, who's now with the Rays, was with the Mariners, and became kind of notorious around the league for exploiting the last second of the pitch clock, right? He would be in the batter's box, but he would not be alert to the pitcher, and he would wait until it had ticked down to 9 seconds. You have to be in and alert by 8. And it just made people crazy.
Yes, right.
I think the benches cleared with Houston at one point because of Caballero. So he was actually able to use it as a real sort of mental advantage to try to get these guys uncomfortable on the mound. And I haven't seen a lot of guys be able to do that. Some of it might be, unique to him, I suppose, but there is a strategic element there that is, at the expense of the mental health of the pitcher potentially, but is an interesting wrinkle for hitters to be able to bring.
It's funny what you're describing. It's Bush League. It's right.
I don't think
you
it's
can
Bush
do
League
it,
at all.
right? But the culture doesn't like it.
I don't think it's Bush League at all. It's the rules. And you got to
Right.
learn how to, and you got to learn how to operate
I
within
agree.
the rules. And you talked about Caballero. I did 60 games on the radio for the Tigers last year, and we went to Boston, and I thought Tristan Casas was masterful at how he was using the pitch clock. And I think one of the big things you got to understand, I'm not sure how many years, but in the last 5, 6, 7 years, guys who've entered professional baseball have not played in the minor leagues without the pitch clock.
Right.
So you have a group of young major leaguers who don't know any different. And those guys, for my money, were the guys that I noticed. Now, this is through my subjective lens of watching games and broadcasting games, those guys were the guys who did a masterful job of manipulating the pitch clock and doing what they need to do. The Machados of the world who are 10 years deep and all this other stuff, and the guys who are just naturally slow, those are the guys who struggled.
Right.
And you would think, as good as they are and as elite as they are, they'd be able to handle it better. But it was actually the opposite because they'd been used to it. This is beyond the non-factor. I loved how hitters manipulated the pitch clock for their, for their own benefit. After you saw guys like Scherzer and even Verlander a little bit earlier in the year, messing with hitters or whatever, they found an advantage. And that's the cat and mouse game. That's the fun of baseball for me.
No, you're right. It's right. I call it Bush League because, right, it's the culture might not like it and the other team doesn't like it, but you're
Figure it
not
out.
you're not their friend, right? That you're playing against them. So no, you're absolutely right. That's also 1890s baseball, is that they had to put these rules in to stop John McGraw from exploiting these rules. But that's the game. Put in a rule to stop it, or otherwise,
Right.
we'll do it. I agree.
Yeah, it felt
right.
like it fell in the realm of strategy and not rule breaking to me.
Okay, great stuff. By the way, sure. Let's hear it for our panel right now. Oh, who wants the baseball? Here we go.
Right.
I'll walk it over. I can get here. See, they're nice and easy. It's early in the morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we are working. Meg, you mentioned how the batter has exploited the pitch clock, taking it down to the last second. I don't know if this will work well with a pitcher because you need to wait. If you do it too often, then they know what you're up to, but you wait for a high leverage situation. The pitcher who still has a couple throws over to first base waits until it gets down to about 2 or 3 seconds. And the runner's going to anticipate him going to the plate, and instead he throws over and catches him leaning. Has that been done throughout? Has anybody exploited that? And if you did it too often, they would know it's coming.
Trying to think of a specific example, but I'm sure that there were guys who were trying to time their throws over, just like, there were catchers who were taking a mound visit rather than a violation when the clock was ticking down. Like, I think we're seeing sort of the strategic permutations of that play out. I'm trying to think of a specific example, like what you said, Bobby.
No, I had one last year and I thought it was masterful because it was a kid that the Tigers selected out of the Rule 5, Mason Englert, and he was in A-ball the year before. And he talk about being used to using the pitch clock to his advantage. It was amazing how good he was at it. And he didn't have the success. Most Rule 5 kids don't have a lot of success in the big leagues. It's just the nature of the beast. But he got in certain situations and absolutely used the pitch clock and the throwovers to his advantage and got himself out of some jams, especially early in the year. One example in Houston where he had Alvarez at the plate, and it was amazing to watch this happen, play out in real life, just how much he manipulated the clock and threw over a couple times, and he froze Alvarez with a fastball at 91 right down the middle because of the stuff that he had been messing with, which you clearly don't see that up very often.
Keep questions nice and tight, and we'll got 15 full minutes.
Two things. One, congratulations to the panel. Being on a panel on MLB Now is not for the faint of heart.
It's not hard. Come on.
Second, I'm just a fan. I haven't done anything quantish. I just want to say for the ghost runner on second, I've been to a number of extra inning games, and I got to the point where I'm begging for a run. I don't leave. I want to see the end of the game, and I'm begging. I don't care who scores it because the game is just going on too long.
So then make it in the 12th inning.
Okay, that would work. That's fine.
I also think, we got all this time back with the pitch clock, right? And so I think we could get rid of, I'm sorry, I can't call it a ghost runner, the zombie runner. A ghost runner means a different thing.
I prefer man myself.
Is catchy, but we got all this time back. So I think that we can, in the instances where games go a little longer, allow for that and not have the balance of our experience of baseball sort of revert back to what it was pre-pitch time. There really weren't that many games going 14, 15, 16 innings. It wasn't very common. So I think that with the time we've gotten back, let's get those guys off of
I expected that to happen and it didn't. And I think a good compromise would be, and that was the old WBC rules, right?
Right.
Where you can have it start in the 12th because teams do say those like 18 inning games like crush and ruin. I understand it's difficult. Maybe there's a compromise. I thought eventually it should go away.
And I know that the players prefer having the zombie runner. Like that has been the consensus that has emerged among players. So, that's something to take into account too, I suppose.
Would you do the current system, or would you do Japanese style tie after 12?
No tying in baseball.
No.
Just saying, it's a tie in Japan after 12.
No.
Just saying.
Will Carroll, go ahead.
Yeah, first, when they tested moving the mound in the Atlantic League, it increased injuries by 13%, albeit the Atlantic League. So I'll give it a caveat. But the one thing we haven't addressed is the fact that these days, every pitcher is Nolan Ryan. He throws 100 miles an hour.
Right.
He's got a breaking ball that moves 22 inches. How do we address that? If we deaden the ball, we're giving the pitchers even more of an advantage.
If you deaden the ball, give pitchers more of an advantage. Well, when the ball was a little, again, I would just go back to early 2 years ago, when the ball, it was essentially the same game with just a fewer home runs. And so the incentive structure changes as to how the way players are either thinking of situational hitting or the risk reward, which I might strike out, but I might hit that ball into the seats. And I don't think it leads to an artificially low run scoring system. I don't think it does that. Again, maybe weird things will happen if you completely deaden the ball. But again, 1986, 1951 levels are not, it's not 1908. There's still home runs being hit. Next question. Where are we?
Right here.
Who's got the ball? There we go.
So a couple of questions. The first is very gently, I have extremely different perspectives on the shift and pitch framing and some of the other things that we touched on. It wouldn't be appropriate within this context to divulge into those. So I'm wondering which forum or vehicle the three of you think is the best place for us to have those discussions.
Give me your best question. Give me your best question. I'm sure we can answer it, or at least address it. Go ahead.
My best question.
You said you have questions in other areas. Go ahead.
No, not questions. Different perspectives on the shift and pitch framing.
Okay, ask it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you talked about the aesthetics of the game being disrupted by allowing the shift, but I see it very differently. I think that's a strategic move that the defense is allowed to make and something that I enjoy.
You like the shift?
Yeah.
So did I.
And
Absolutely.
so there was, and then it forces primarily left-handers who don't learn how to use the whole field to have to learn to use the whole field. So I think it may have been an effectively wild episode where we talked about Freddie Freeman being our favorite hitter to watch.
We talked about favorite. I mean, yes, I do like watching Freddie Freeman. I don't know if he was too. I think I brought up Brantley on that.
Oh, that does sound familiar. Yeah,
recently retired. But yeah, he was one of my favorite pure hitters to watch.
So if you allow the shift, then you force left-handers like Joey Gallo, who are just leaning into pulling the ball and having to learn to hit to the whole field.
Right. You're protecting the Joey Gallos of the world. I agree with you 100%, but I've lost that fight. Right. So I thought, right, to protect that 19-year-old kid who's learning still, or is still, hey, my game can shift in a number of ways. By banning that, you're punishing him and you're protecting Joey Gallo.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Right. I agree. All right.
All right. So we can talk about that as well, but I'm still really interested where you guys think is the best place to have that discourse in those conversations to affect change potentially. And then sort of like part and parcel to that is what do you see as the engines or motivators of change in the game? So you could say it's the fan experience or the ticket receipts, but that doesn't seem accurate because baseball has suffered some decline in the last few years, but it took Theo Epstein in order to get his hands in there and roll up his sleeves in order to make the changes that we saw last year.
Okay, good. That's a good question. We'll answer.
Money drives the deal. Let's be honest. The games were too long. Why were the games too long? Because you can't sell the back from a sponsorship and a marketing perspective. You can't sell the back end of a game that's happening at 11:30, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. It starts in the East Coast. You can't sell that playoff game to advertisers. Visa doesn't want to buy that spot because you know what? Nobody's up. Okay, you got to shorten the game. We got to compact the game. We want people. We don't want to change the product, but we got to make it shorter so we can sell the back end of this thing. There's a lot of money at stake there.
And I would say, without even getting into the weeds that deeply, like you want to make it an excellent entertainment product, right? You want to make it an excellent experience. And even if it's not, immediately rewarded with ticket sales or ratings, you should still do it, right? For the greater good of what you're doing. But I think ratings were up, which is good. It may be incidental. I have no idea. But I think ratings were up. And I think it's a much better product, especially for a lot of people this age who are just watching things on their phones, who will commit to a 2-hour experience and not a 4-hour experience. Go ahead.
And I think, in terms of like the places to have those conversations, I'll just plug SABR here where, your local SABR chapters are a place to think those, potential ramifications through. I don't want to be dismissive of the importance of the fan experience to the central office. I don't know that that is necessarily going to result in Rob Manfred changing his mind about the shift. I think that's a settled question, but I do think fan sentiment matters some. And so to the extent that consensus can be built, I think organizations like SABR, where you can have those conversations, are valuable.
Couple more questions. We have about 8 minutes, so let's get a quick question. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I throw one sentence in? I just think baseball needs to get younger up top too. Like Theo to me is just the beginning.
Great panel. Thank you all. Great discussion. This was alluded to a bit during the discussion. We talked about making more diversity in the offensive approach to the game. With the rule changes, do you think we'll see maybe a change in the style of play or going back to specific players? Like a Willie McGee, a Willie Wilson, switch hitters who could fly, hit lots of triples in 1985.
Those guys were
to that.
I'm going to say no. And the reason I'm going to say no is because we've had that a couple times in the last probably 10 years. You look at those 13, 14, 15, 16 Royals teams.
Right.
I thought it was happening. I worked in the front office of in LA in 14. We won the division. And the one team I was scared of that whole playoff run was seeing the Royals. I was begging for us to get the A's, and they end up losing the wild card game, and because they had drug us all over the park playing that way, and we ran away with the division that year by quite a distance. And that we could not beat the Royals because they were a track meet, and it was unbelievable. I was like, this could be the beginning of a sea change in the game, and it wasn't. So I thought at least it could be a little bit of an impetus to develop the game a little bit. I don't think we're going to we won't get back to that. I think we'll get a little bit closer, but we won't get back to that.
Let me disagree. We can absolutely get back to that. Absolutely. If the ball is not flying out of the park at an accelerated rate, you will absolutely get back to that. I'll give you an example. I do a thing on our show on MLB Now. By the way, we're back March 25th, noon Eastern, and this is exactly the audience we want. By the way, this is all we do is talk about this stuff. Full hour. And if you're sending in a question, please send in and put SABR Analytics, if it's hashtag SABR Analytics, so we know you're one of this group, and we'll try to get back to you because we're trying to cultivate an intelligent audience. We'd love to get you involved. I do a thing called baseball-y and unbaseball-y plays, which I think is the next level of evolution in the game. Rewarding baseball awareness, right? There are things we're not quite measuring out on the field that are vitally important. Like, do we measure? I brought up the Padres. The Padres had a very good defensive run saved, but how was their team coordinated defense? It was not good. Individual defense, very good with certain players, of course, Tatis, Ha-Seong Kim, but their team coordinated defense was just lousy. They weren't getting double plays. They were giving up extra bases. So I'll give you an example. We had a game where the Chicago White Sox had like 2 or 3 unbaseball-y plays. They're a bad baseball awareness team. They're a bad baseball team on the field. And I told my producer, I said, hey, we got 3 plays, got to use this play. This was great. This was great. This was great. Or this was terrible. I'm sorry. The White Sox were terrible. And he said, yeah, but the White Sox won the game. I said, yeah, they hit 3 home runs.
Right.
So if it's like the Cleveland playing their style, Cleveland Guardians baseball, right? You're all aware of it's contact. They don't strike out. They play good defense, but they don't hit home runs. But if the ball is flying out of the park 3 times a game, Cleveland doesn't win. If it's flying out once or twice a game, Cleveland can win. So again, Cleveland is going to make a decision relatively soon. If the ball's flying out of the park, then our, little Miles Straw offense isn't going to work.
Right.
But if the ball is a little deader, our little Miles Straw attack can work.
I mean, I don't know if the Miles Straw attack will work anyway, but
you need
Miles
Straw. Yeah, I get it.
I think what you are seeing though is guys who can do both, right? Like, do we have Diamondbacks fans in the room? Like Corbin Carroll, when his shoulder isn't jammed up, can send the ball out of the ballpark. And I mean, he is an 80 runner. He is a true 80 runner. You've never seen a guy fly like this, right? And so I do think that there are going to be guys who have that combination skill set who maybe in prior eras would have de-emphasized the speed component because they were being told by their front office, like, we're just not at a good break-even point on the value here, who are going to be like, let me go a little bit, you know? So again, not everyone can be Corbin Carroll. Not everyone can be Ronald Acuna Jr. So when the very best guys are able to do everything, I don't know how useful that is to like the kid in the park who's trying to decide like what kind of ball player am I going to be. He probably already knows like, yeah, it would be great to be Ronald Acuna Jr. But seeing that proof of concept with these guys who are able to do a lot of things really, really well might have some downstream effects. Like you go to backfields here and you still see guys doing Cueto shimmy, even though we're trying to get unique deliveries out of the game, right? So ball players watch ball players and they model their games after other ball players. So I don't know. Let's see how it looks in a couple of years.
Along those lines, Meg, I think Corbin Carroll's still deciding what type of player he's going to be. Is he going to be, 5'10", 175, or in 2 years going to be 5'10", 210, jacked and looking to
I was hoping you'd say, will he be 6'3" in 2 years? And I was
well, that's down the line. That could probably.
That stays in the middle. He's a rookie.
Right.
He's a great ball player.
Yeah,
Well, he can be effective, right?
Yes.
Knowing exactly what he is with
Yes.
natural progression.
I agree.
He doesn't have to pick, and
I
that's what
agree.
makes me mad.
I agree.
While we're, I paid some homage to some of the founding fathers of SABR. Also, I see Will here, see Joe Sheehan here. I'm really looking forward to the baseball prospectus panel coming up. These guys made baseball so much more interesting through the years. And along those lines, Clay, if you'd like to give one last question.
Yes, I was going to say one of the things that analysts did clearly establish is that from a hitting perspective, at least in the major leagues, a strikeout is just another out.
It's not.
Effectively within the game, that is how it works. And clearly that maximizing your contact at the cost of more strikeouts has been a winning strategy for hitters. From the pitcher side, they have also been strongly incentivized to make strikeouts. So we've got a system where one side is strongly incentivized to have strikeouts. There's no disincentive on the other side to avoid them. And any type of rule changes that you're going to throw out there, like deadening the ball, if it doesn't address both of those aspects, it's not going to solve the problem.
What will solve the problem?
Well, you'd probably have to make a rule on both the hitting. You'd have to have some kind of penalty for strikeouts from the hitter side. I think until and unless
Like
hitters
what?
have an active incentive to avoid striking out.
Like what? What would be a proper penalty?
Oh, in my wild imagination,
Yeah, go ahead.
it comes to the point of you strike out this inning, you don't get to take the field next inning.
Oh,
yeah. So you're staying down.
By the way, see, you throw it out there. See, you thought I was extreme. You thought I was extreme. No, it's more extreme.
You got 6 dudes
And do push-ups or have to run sprints. Yeah.
And from the pitcher side,
Drop and give me 20.
I think you would need to, at some point, you've thrown too many pitches to this batter. And so there would be some sort of pitch count even per batter. And the fact that you had to take 3, 4, 5, 6 pitches to get rid of this batter. So you need to incentivize the pitchers to put the ball in.
Okay, right. No, we got to come up with something. Right. That's, I applaud the effort. Right.
We're like a scout on an August backfield asking to roll the inning. Like it's just too hot here. Let's go. Roll it.
In my less extreme versions, I would say the player could take the field, but not with a glove. Go back to the 1880s. You're going to tear
Effectively wild.
That's tremendous. Looking forward to the BP panel in a few hours. I'll let you, Meg Rowley, Bobby Scales, Mark Simon, our outstanding panel. Thanks for listening, everybody. Again, MLB Now back March 25th. We're on at noon Eastern, and reach us on Twitter at MLB Now. We want to hear from you and love to speak to you. Thank you. Good job.